April 17th Humboldt County Association of Governments Board meeting. We'll call this meeting to order, and can we get a roll call?
Chair Johnson,
Here.
Supervisor Madrone,
Here.
Councilmember Napier,
Here.
Mayor Burgell,
Here.
Councilmember Atkins Salazar,
Here.
Councilmember Jorgensen,
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Kenny,
Here.
Councilmember Orr,
Here.
Pack Member Arroyo, Pack Member Allstrand.
Here.
Thank you. At this time, we will adjourn as the HCOG Board and convene as the Policy Advisory Committee. And our first item is public comment on non-agenda items. If there's anyone that would like to make a comment on non-agenda items, this is the time. And I don't see any. So we come to presentations. The first item is a Bike Month proclamation. I will read that at this time, and I believe we have Peach Green here to accept and bring us some informational items. So, a proclamation of the Humboldt County Association of Governments Board of Directors recognizing May 2025 as Bike Month Humboldt. And whereas bicycling is part of the solution for addressing transportation needs, such as increasing mobility for youth and other people who do not drive, providing low-cost transportation options, and increasing access and connectivity while reducing traffic congestion. And whereas bicycle infrastructure takes up less land and costs less to build and maintain than automobile infrastructure, for instance, 12 bike spaces fit into one car parking space. And whereas bicycling is an economic driver in areas with commuter or recreational bike facilities, study after study shows that locally based retail sales go up with bicycle improvements, and that people spend more money overall at local businesses when they bike than when they drive. And whereas bicycle travel helps improve air quality and can help us achieve the goals of Global Warming Solutions Act of 2006, which requires Californians to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions by 80% by 2050. And whereas bicycle commuting promotes physical activity, which leads to better fitness, lower healthcare costs, and improved mental health due to stress reduction. Employees who commute by bicycle on average have fewer sick days and higher productivity. And whereas HCOG supports bicycle and pedestrian planning as a regional transportation priority and has adopted safe and sustainable transportation targets to double the number of all trips made by walking, bicycling, and transit. And whereas HCOG joins the Bike Month Humboldt Coalition in supporting Humboldt jurisdictions and communities in their efforts to advance and improve bicycling for all. And whereas the month of May is National Bike Month, as May is also Clean Air Month. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Board of the Humboldt County Association of Governments finds increasing bicycle use is in the local, state, national, and global interest, and proclaims May 2025 as Bike Month Humboldt, encourages member jurisdictions to adopt similar proclamations supporting Bike Month, and urges residents and visitors to participate in Bike Month events and other activities that contribute to the health and vitality of the community and environment. And I believe Peach Green is here.
Thank you to the Humboldt County Association of Governments. I accept the May is Bike Month proclamation on behalf of the Humboldt County Department of Health and Human Services Public Health Branch in the Healthy Communities Division. I'm a health education specialist in the Physical Activity and Nutrition program, and my name is Peach Green. Public health supports active transportation projects in the community and participates in local efforts focused on promoting active transportation. Our county has many community partners dedicated to this work. Encouraging active modes of transportation improves public health. When more people walk and bike, communities experience safer streets, a stronger sense of community, and reduced traffic demands. Both walking and cycling are great ways to be physically active and are linked to improved mental health. Public health provides training, support, and technical assistance to schools and community partners wishing to promote active transportation. There are several community events happening during May is Bike Month that we hope you can join. For a full list and all the details, you can visit bikemonthhumboldt.org. There will be a calendar of events as well as the poster with some good details on there. Throughout the month of May, there will be special deals at bike-friendly businesses. For a full list, go to the website, bikemonthhumboldt.org. You can join the Bike Month Challenge May 1st through 31st by signing up on the Love to Ride app. You can track your rides, provide feedback to bike planners, and even win prizes. Group bike rides will be taking place throughout all of May. There will be mural rides in Old Town and Manila, several pancake rides in Blue Lake, also Eureka, and a special ride with your public official in Arcata. CRTP is leading a bike audit in Eureka. No bike is required. There will be an Arcata Kids Bike Rodeo at Fuente Nueva Charter School. Kinetic Sculpture Race is happening Memorial Day weekend. And last but not least, the bike celebration will be happening at Jefferson Community Center and Park, May 31st from 11 to 2. You can view the Humboldt's World of Bicycling. We will have exhibits, speeches, helmets for youth, Los Giles food truck, free bike tune-ups, games, a smoothie bike, and pedal-powered music with Ponies of Harmony. So lots of fun stuff, and we hope to see all of you there. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Does anybody on the board have any questions for comments?
Just a quick comment, Mr. Chairman. By pleasant coincidence, I happened to ride my bike a little over 12 miles today, which is much further than I've been riding lately, and I feel great. I'm happy to support the proclamation.
Any other? Well, thank you. And thank you. And at this time, we come to our next item, presentation of the fiscal year 23-24 TDA audits, fiscal and compliance. And Mr. Keith Borges is here from the Anderson, Lucas, Somerville, and Borges.
So I'd like to welcome and thank Keith for coming and presenting the fiscal compliance audits for fiscal year ending 2024, and especially that he can make himself available during this very busy tax season.
Yeah.
So thank you, Keith.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so I'm a little rummy. It's because April 15th is still pretty close in the rearview mirror here. Anyway, we did complete the annual audits for the June 30, 2024 year, and all of the entities are complete. And the HCOG audit consists of numerous entities. The two joint powers authorities, HTA and HCOG, as well as all of the cities and the county, as they claim transit money for either transit or non-transit uses. For HCOG and for Humboldt Transit Authority, you get a full-blown governmental audit. And that means that for HCOG, it's an audit of their operational accounts, which is where all of the OWP work goes on. And it also includes their capacity as a fiduciary as they administer and distribute the LTF money, the state transit assistance money, the state of good repair money and the regional surface money. So we look at those allocations and apportionments and distributions to the various cities and other claimants, and then test the disbursements and the expenditures of those monies at the claimant levels. So at the claimant levels for the cities and the county, we're just looking at the funds that are claimed through the HCOG process. It was a very small little piece of those entities, a transit fund, maybe a street fund, a road fund. And we generate a separate financial statement. So each of you would have gotten a copy of the financial statement for your respective city or county. We generate a financial statement and then also perform annual compliance requirements for the expenditures of that money, whether it's a transit or a non-transit use. So each of those claimants are going to get an audit report that reports on the fair presentation of their financial statements, as well as the compliance testing that we did. And if there were any findings, compliance related, they would be noted in the footnotes to the claimant's individual report. And if significant enough, it would be included in the management letter that goes to HCOG that we'll be talking about briefly at the end of my presentation. For HCOG, as I mentioned, the audit for your organization covers all of the operational activities. That's the expenditure of the rural planning funds you get, the PPM money, Caltrans money, any of the grant monies that come in, the monies over which you have operational control. Lately, the last couple of years, that has included some additional pools of money, additional programs. The REAP program has been a significant source of additional funds that have gone through HCOG. The TERSIP program was a new one, and I believe starting in the new fiscal year, the SB1 monies. So a lot going through the HCOG accounts. Now, as a typical governmental entity, your financial statements are prepared and presented in accordance with governmental reporting standards. And that means that there's two different presentations. There's one on a full accrual basis, known as a government-wide statements. And those are pretty abbreviated. I think there's only two pages of your report for those. And those are where the activities are presented on a full accrual basis and where we recognize the liabilities, the full liabilities that the entity has. That's where you're going to see your GASB 68 pension liability, that big number, as well as the other post-employment benefits liability that HCOG has, which is for the retiree health benefits. Those are on pages, I think, 5 and 7. The governmental financial statements, which are the more traditional set of statements, those are going to be on pages 9 through 16. Overall, HCOG, we did render an unmodified opinion, which is good. That does mean that the financial statements there are presented fairly in accordance with governmental accounting standards. This year, with that full accrual accounting and the adjustment of the GASB pension liabilities, overall, that number went up about $300,000. And the GASB liability comes with some associated, what they call deferred inflows and deferred outflows, because it's all about the timing of when expenditures are made versus when they get recognized in your financial statements. Your normal financial statements are on the governmental method, which simply means we report the money that came in and what you spent that year. But for the full accrual presentation, we have to recognize these accounting, in the accounting world, these liabilities and these associated items. So overall, the combination of the GASB liability and the inflows and outflows went up about $300,000 this year. The year before, they went up about $80,000. But essentially, the change in your unrestricted deficit, you actually show a deficit on the full accrual statement. The change is almost exactly the 300,000 from last year to this year, which is not uncommon. In the governmental statements, your assets stayed about the same, $2.6 million, mostly in cash and receivables. And of that, the SAFE program accounts for $1.2 million of that. And that, again, is pretty comparable to the June 30 balance. It didn't change much. Operationally, the operational statement shows a large excess of expenditures over revenues this year. Last year, it was the other way around. You had a surplus of almost 400,000. And again, that's where it's about the timing of when the money comes in versus when it's spent. Last year, you took in some of the grant money, the REAP grant money, and it didn't get spent till this year. This year, over 700,000 is being shown as an expenditure for that REAP program. Additionally, the SAFE program had a very large capital expenditure in the June 30, 24 year of over $200,000. So again, there typically is good, significant swings where one year on the books it looks like you have a profit and the next year you have a loss. But overall, the unrestricted fund balance for HCOG, as in its governmental accounting world, is still in this around $630,000. Last year it was $660,000. So it's pretty stable from a standpoint of the available and unrestricted funds that HCOG has at its disposal. Then we also have a series of statements that cover the fiduciary fund activities. Again, just the money coming in from those various TDA and STA and so on programs where HCOG is acting as a conduit to get the money out to the claimants. Additionally, the audit report includes a section, a management's discussion and analysis section on pages 3 to 8, and that's where management provides a brief summary of the activity and results for the year. There's also expanded footnotes that cover some 12 to 14 pages, which again are required disclosures for any governmental entity. Covers the various accounting methods and different things that have to be disclosed. A large portion of those pages do deal with the PERS, the GASB 68 PERS disclosures and so forth. And then lastly, there's 5 or 6 pages of supplementary schedules that provide some details to the TDA program and the STA program and so on. That's the bulk of the audit itself for HCOG. Additionally, every year there's a few other required communications that are in any audit that are required to be made, and we include those in what we identify as our management letter, which is a separate item. And it covers the required disclosures to HCOG. One has to do with if there were any findings, and we will talk about those shortly. And the other required communication is an annual one that is made to management that it's a standard format, but it discloses or discusses whether there were any issues that we had during the course of the audit with management, if we came up, had any difficulties with getting answers, getting information, and so on. And that was certainly not an issue and not a case. So that is noted in that letter, that everything that we needed to have to complete the audit was provided for us. And then the third part of that management letter is where we do go over the findings that come about during the course of our audits. And that would be any of the compliance items, either at the claimant level or for HCOG. Our letter typically takes a format where we address the status of prior year's findings and indicate whether anything still needs to be done, and then a section for any findings during the current year. Going through the prior findings, and these are going to be very familiar to those of you who've been on HCOG's board for a while, the two most common findings, or the two most significant compliance areas we look at are for the transit providers, and that's their fund eligibility and their fare box ratio. The fund eligibility compliance test is a measure of how much of their TDA funds did a claimant get compared to how much they needed to operate their transit system. So we look at the operating costs for the year, less the fares they collected, less funds they received from any other source, whether it be state transit money. Sometimes there's governmental operating assistance a city can get. There was a lot of COVID money at one point. But in any event, it's a mathematical computation that says based on your operating costs and the other funding you received from other sources, there's a limit to how much of your own TDA money you should be claiming for transit purposes. So we go through that calculation for all of the transit providers each year. Last year, the city of Arcata, because of receiving a large amount of ancillary funding, operating funds from other sources, had an excess calculation of $182,000. And typically there are 3 methodologies for resolving that excess finding. One, it can be returned to their TDA fund, and it's their money. It just goes right back to their own pool. Or they can reduce a following year's claim, an amount they would otherwise be eligible for, by that excess. Because the money is in hand, they already have it at the city level, so they don't need that the following year. Or it could be re-identified and spent for capital purposes, which is a different use of the money than for operational purposes. So those are the remedies that are typically available. And as of the most current claim, the city had not yet addressed how they were going to resolve the excess from June 30, 2023. So that still needs to be followed up on. Also last year, the County of Humboldt tracks the TDA funds that are available on an entity-by-entity basis. All the money is in one fund, of course, but it's allocated and tracked by the various cities and the county and so on. At the time of our audit last year, because of some of the changes that the county had, that information was not available at the time of our audit, and we had recommended that the staff kind of make sure that was being done and that it get kind of caught up and up to date. And since then, that has happened, and additionally, staff has also begun tracking that information internally as well, kind of keeping their own set of the TDA account on an entity-by-entity basis, which is very helpful because that's the amount of funds that each claimant has available to draw upon. And I think it's probably more readily available through HCOG now than it might have been through the county to get that information. So that one has been resolved and taken care of. Another prior year claimant had been for the city of Arcata, and when they were running the Greyhound program back for several years, that program had been operating, the Greyhound part of it had been operating at a deficit. And there needed to be some sort of reconciliation of that deficit to make sure that TDA funds had not or were not being used to subsidize that program. And so this, very recently, this year, the city finally did go back and really drill down into what had been charged and allocated to the Greyhound part of their transit fund compared to the regular Arcata and Mad River transit system, and found that over the years, they had been charging significantly more to the Greyhound program accounts than they really should have, based on a more accurate or reasonable allocation of the staff time. I think what they had said was that there had been a fixed percentage that had been used in the past from years and years and years ago, and it had just never really been looked at and analyzed and updated. So the staff did that. They shared their findings with us, and we're satisfied that the charges that did get made to the Greyhound program were likely overstated. And so in terms of offsetting that deficit, I think we do believe that it's an appropriate correction or fix to that issue. We also went back and looked at we revisited the compliance findings for those intervening years. Or I think there were 5 or 6 years that they went back and specifically identified areas where the costs had been overcharged. We went back and looked at and redid the compliance testing in each of those years, and also are able to report that that did not create any negative impact or consequence to any of the finding or any of the compliance testing that had been done originally for those years. So from our perspective, we feel that finding can also be resolved and removed. Another prior finding was City of Fortuna has had a difficulty meeting their fare box ratio for several years now. So the prior finding had been that they hadn't met it in June of 23. The normal penalty phase of not meeting your fare box ratio has been waived because of the COVID situation, and I believe that waiver continues through at least June of 25. So there's really nothing to do on that particular finding. We also had noted through the years that statutorily there was an April 1st filing date that the claimants were supposed to submit their annual claim to HCOG for purposes of letting them know where and how much funding they wanted. And that date was rarely met. And so we looked a little closer and found that the HCOG board, or any TPA actually, can in fact establish their own filing date if they document and include it in their local rules and regulations. So we would recommend that your board do that you look at the timeline that works best for the claimants here, and just document that they don't need to follow the April 1st date that's in the TDA code, as long as they meet your documented application date or filing date of sometime later. It's a challenge to submit that claim by April 1st for the upcoming year. There's no doubt about it. And the last prior finding had to do with the not being able to get all of the annual audits done by the March 31st due date for them last year. Last year we had 2 entities that were not done until after March 31st. So that was a finding last year. For the current year, these are going to be very quick because they're the same. These are all similar to the prior year findings. The first is the excess fund eligibility for Fortuna and for Arcata. Fortuna had $48,000 for their senior program, and Arcata had $40,000 for their program. So those are findings that will need to be addressed going forward. And the City of Fortuna, once again, didn't quite meet their 10% fare box ratio. It was 7%. So what would happen going forward if and when the COVID, because there is still the COVID relief this year, so there's no penalty aspect of it. Going forward, if they fail to meet in any year in which there is no relief, what happens is the amount of the fare box revenue shortfall, which is they're supposed to collect 10% of their operating costs in fare revenues. This year, their shortfall was around $6,800, meaning that they collected $6,800 in fares, less than the 10%. Going forward, if the COVID rules were not here, then that $6,800, there's a 3-year cycle that would happen, and that $6,800 would be required to be held out of one of their subsequent year's TDA claims. So it's important, obviously, to as much as possible, practical, to meet that 10% requirement. And then lastly, the audits. We had one audit this year that we didn't quite get done by the March 31st date. It was done a few days after, but technically that date was missed. But they're all done now and have been submitted to the state. And that's the end of my presentation. And if there are questions that anyone has, I can try to answer them.
Does anyone have a question for Keith regarding the audits?
Is the Greyhound program no longer operating in Arcata, or is it still going on? The Greyhound portion?
It was ended November of 23, I believe. Yeah, I think it was, yeah.
Okay,
It's no
thanks.
longer.
Any other questions?
I have one, Mike. I am curious about the SAFE fund. In the past, we've talked about exploring whether there's eligibility to, because call boxes and highway patrols are not the only strategies that, some members of this board have shared that they thought would work well before. Is it on, maybe this is less a question for you as an auditor, but who determines whether the use of those funds is in line with the objectives? Is that a state determination? Is that something that would be evaluated by the auditor? Is it a mix of evaluators of that?
I'm sorry.
The SAFE funds, the Service Authority for Freeway Emergency Funds. There's a statement in here about what the expenditures are limited to, and I know in the past we've asked that there be more exploration of how those funds could be used, and so I wondered if there was an auditor component to evaluating the appropriate use of those funds.
Don't believe that that's Keith's job to do that.
Okay.
But I do have a note to talk to Brendan about that when he comes on.
Okay.
Because I did see where Beth had suggested a couple of things, and so that is something that I will have a discussion with Brendan about. And so
Okay.
we'll come back to this board.
Okay. It was sort of an oblique way of getting it in there, but I wanted to make sure it didn't get lost. I know that Supervisor Madrone was very interested in seeing
Right.
some
Yep.
evaluation
Okay.
of that as well. So,
Thank you.
thanks.
Okay. Any other? I guess that's it.
Okay. Thank you.
Oh, is there a public comment?
Okay.
Oh, okay. Colin Fisk with CRTP has a public comment.
Yeah, good evening. I'm not an accountant, so you'll have to forgive me if I get this wrong, but just wanted to comment that it's my understanding that although it's been the practice traditionally for HCOG to distribute the TDA funds to all of the the county and all of the cities for them to then distribute it further to the transit agencies, that part of it is not necessarily statutorily required, and it could just go directly from HCOG to the transit agencies. And if that is the case, maybe that would help simplify future not only audits but just the administrative burden of getting that money out to begin with. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you. I see some notes being taken on that. Any other, no public comment, no comments from the board? Well, thank you,
Okay,
Keith.
thank you.
And once again, you've done a remarkable job with, especially during tax time at the same time. So
Yes.
thank you.
Thank you. You're welcome.
This is Keith's last time doing
Yep.
audits for HCOG for now.
I
Yeah,
know.
So we've been finally timed out or termed out, and they'll have a new auditor. We're working on where we will still possibly be involved and work with HCOG, being able to use some of our lengthy experience and knowledge in working as a contract CPA ahead of the new auditor coming in. So,
Yes.
so that would be, I think, is a good way to transition to a different role.
Well, I understand they're from out of the area, so they would probably love to have your help.
Yeah, it's likely to be a different process than what they're used to. So I think us being the ones who were involved for so many years, being able to help with that transition makes good sense. We're happy to do that, as long as it's after April 15th, and it will be.
Understood. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Keith.
Okay. Moving on. So at this time, we come to the consent calendar, and we have we have 3 items. Approval of the.
Mike, we still have, oh, I'm sorry. Never mind. Just kidding.
Well, we do have a statement to be made regarding receiving and filing the audit from the Anderson, Lucas, Somerville, and Borges. So then we come to the consent calendar, approval of the meeting record from March 20th, the City of Trinidad's fiscal year 24-25 LTF claim, and a 2025 TDA Article 3 bike and ped allocation request from the City of Arcata. Would anyone like to pull anything? Is there any public comment on the consent calendar items? I don't see any coming. I don't see any here. Can we get a motion for the consent calendar approval?
Motion approval of consent calendar.
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. A voice vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None. So thank you. And there were no items removed from the consent calendar. So we come to PAC action items, the first being the 25-26 unmet transit need report of findings.
Good evening. My name is Michelle Nielsen. I am the contract planner that prepared the report of findings in consultation with many partners, and namely the HCOG staff. And then I did also consult with not HCOG staff, with under the direction of HCOG, and then there was consultation with the transit operators as well. So HTA, Humboldt Transit Authority, and then obviously the HCOG board. Thank you, Amy. So just kind of a review of what are unmet transit needs, because there's kind of 2 components. There's does a transit request that was received during the process, is it an unmet transit need, and then is it reasonable to meet? And so those are kind of the process of processing that input. So starting with the unmet transit needs, this definition was recommended by the SSTAC and then ultimately adopted by the HCOG board in December 2023. At a minimum, requested trips from residents who do not have access to public or specialized transportation or private transportation services, or trips that are requested from residents who do not have the resources to travel to medical care, shopping, social activities, school, education, employment, or it could also be proposed transportation, specialized transportation, private transportation services that are identified in a regional transportation plan. And also there's sufficient broad-based support from the persons who are most likely to use a service on a routine basis. And the established threshold is 2 persons have expressed that there's a transit need, and that there's common, like commonality with respect to like the transit service, RTS, ETS, and that the frequency. So there's some intersection. Okay, and just making sure I go over everything. And so the reasonable to meet criteria. So each request that is found to be an unmet transit need is then evaluated to determine if it meets the reasonable to meet criteria. Again, this was adopted by the board. One component is the service must be operationally feasible and financially sustainable, which means that there's adequate roadways and it's safe to operate, sufficient funding available for identified funding sources to cover the service's marginal operating cost for at least 3 years. Must meet the minimum marginal fare box return ratio of 10% within 2 years. And you can't compare unmet transit needs to the needs for streets and roads. And then there are some understanding that that initially that a new service may not automatically meet all the thresholds, but that it be regularly evaluated against performance metrics to make sure it's there is enough ridership to sustain it. And then in terms of we'll go to this, but I didn't have a good slide. I should have put something in the middle here. But in terms of the public outreach that was done in fall of last year, there was a total of 9 notice public hearings that were held. Most of the cities held public hearings. The city of Fortuna at the time was just not a good time for them. There was things going on at City Hall and they declined. However, the city of Fortuna, the staff posted flyers to advertise the other hearings. There was an available online survey, and that was part of the advertisement as means for folks to give input. The HCOG board public hearing is one that is required. The other ones with the jurisdictions it's great to have them, but they're actually not required. So anyways, there was 9 hearings. There were 2 public meetings, so not hearings. The Humboldt County Public Works, they had an agenda item with the board of supervisors on unmet transit needs in, I think that was December. And the North Coast Tribal Transportation Commission also discussed the matter as part of their November 2024 meeting. 77 individuals completed the online English survey. A separate Spanish language survey was made available and also advertised. However, that we didn't get any responses to the Spanish online survey. And then to help alert the public about the process and the availability of the survey, HTA ran advertisements on their in-bus electronic message boards. And then also HCOG staff coordinated with College of the Redwoods, and flyers were posted at CR. So should have had in between slide. So these first 2 here, these are in the report. Let me just walk through a little bit. The number corresponds to the finding in the report, that number. And then on the later slides, you'll see in brackets a number after, and that's the number of comments we received. These first 2 here are input that we received, but they were not found to be an unmet transit need. So one was that the request that was received, RTS span service changes to provide service later in the evenings on weekdays. February of last year, RTS began operating earlier and later service, adding 2 northbound runs. On that basis, it was found, and also with input from HTA, that was not an unmet transit need. And the other one, number 4 in the report, related to input on dial-a-ride. That was found not to be an unmet transit needs because there are actual federal requirements under the Americans with Disabilities Act that require all fixed route public transportation systems provide paratransit service. And so our recommendation on that item is for the transit service providers to reach out to the social service agencies and their clients to identify the gaps in service and to address those. And then, an HCOG can help facilitate those conversations as needed. So now the next set of slides are the requests we received that were found to be unmet transit needs. They were found to be reasonable to meet, but in all cases, there's not funding available. So the one that received the most was more frequent service on the RTS. We received 11. So we ended up focusing on the Arcata North service because that currently operates with an 1 hour headways. Arcata North, I'm so starting like Arcata up to airport and up into Trinidad. HTA is in the process of implementing microtransit for Arcata North and to improve that frequency and to increase the headways. And the estimated number of daily riders is 153 folks. Would definitely exceed the fare box ratio estimate at its estimated 21%. The reason it was identified as an unmet transit needs is this microtransit. It's a pilot project and it's being supported by REAP money. It's temporary. It's not funding that would likely convert into being sustainable to sustain this service. So in terms of the reasonable to meet part of the financial part of it, it doesn't meet that. So that was found to be it was found to be reasonable to meet, but there's not funding available. All the HCA doesn't have any other available funding and no funding in the pipeline at this time to continue operation of that. The third would be express service on RTS. We received a lot of comments on that. It would exceed the fare box ratio of 10%. However, the operational cost is over $460,000, and 2 new buses would need to be procured to run that service. And again, the funding. I might sound like a broken record saying that again and again. So that was why that finding was made. More frequent service on Arcata Mad River. There was discussion about this item at the SS TAC because the Arcata Mad River did initiate operation of the Green Gold fixed route, and Cal Poly Humboldt provides operational funding. It does run in the morning. And then pauses and then runs again in the afternoons. It operates weekdays when Cal Poly Humboldt is in session. The adopted transportation development plan does recommend a separate, early AM route for workers. I think the start time for that would be 6. And then it does recommend a weekday route that is similar to the Green and Gold that is operating, but it has greater coverage. So there was discussion about this item, whether it was really, an unmet need, but ultimately the SS TAC did recommend the finding that was made and is contained in your report for this one, number 5. So number 6, later night Saturday service. This is a repeat a need that comes as part of this process. So in the 2023-24 report of findings, it was found to be an unmet transit need and reasonable to meet, and a funding source they thought they had identified. However, it then came that the funding, which I have notes about, it was funding SB 125 and it's bridge funding. However, it turned out that the funding could not be used for this later night Saturday service because the HTA ended up needing to use that funding to continue to maintain existing levels of service, or what they were already running. They needed those funds to fill the gaps that they identified. It is noted that based on the data that the estimated fare box ratio is just barely over 10%. So yeah, but it was previously found to be reasonable to meet. Sunday service, over 200 riders would be our estimated 11% fare box return ratio, but it does, according to the information from HTA and other reports, the operating cost to do that would be $600,000, and that's reflects that the Transportation Development Plan recommends that implementing, because there's not a Sunday service being operated at this point, that not be operated alone on just RTS, because people wouldn't be able to further connect to their destinations. And so the TDP recommends that it be if it's launched, that it be operated on all routes, so people could have better connectivity to their destinations. Number 8 is to expand ETS service to Greater Eureka, specifically Merletown. The Green Route does service that area, but also services the Bayshore Mall and is a loop. And so the headway, there's the recommendation to increase the headway by changing to a hub and spoke model. However, that change would affect the other ETS routes, and so to undertake that can't be done in a vacuum. And again, the funding just isn't there to do that, to make sure it's marketed to the riders, existing riders, and so they understand the change and to make that, to operate that and launch it. So we're getting through these. Another one we heard was to expand service in Blue Lake. Currently services via Intercity Willow Creek. There's a lack of capital and operational funding to implement a fixed route service. There is potential for the city could look at the feasibility of operating a local on-demand microtransit service, but funding that would be appropriate would need to be secured. And there's, again, it's a broken record. Expand Arcata Mad River service to South Arcata, South G. So integrating into existing route would actually impact existing stops on the route. And that actually some stops on the existing route would be skipped in order to, if they did this integration. Ideally, a new route would be added to accommodate, to better serve, but again, lack of funding to provide a new route to provide that service. Bayside, so previously there was physical barriers to modifying the red line to resolve, but that was resolved with the completion of the roundabout. However, Arcata Mad River advised that funding would be needed to support that route change, and their funds are, they didn't have extra funding available. I think this is our last one. And then we did receive 5 requests for later service on Southern Humboldt Intercity, and there could be future potential service opportunities using the North State Express. However, further evaluation feasibility would need to be performed before launching on that effort. So those are all of them in the report. Staff's recommendation following, if there's any questions, but to receive any public comment. And staff's recommendation is to that the PAC recommend the HCOG board adopt the fiscal year 2025-2026 unmet transit needs report of findings determining there are unmet transit needs that are reasonable to meet but cannot be funded. That is resolution 2510 in your packet. And so that's my presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Well, thank you. Is there any PAC member questions regarding the unmet transit needs?
I don't have any questions, but I just want to thank you for doing this and being so thorough. We appreciate it.
Yeah, yes.
I wondered if at this time could be included, because it seems that it's kind of stating that it wouldn't be considered in the future.
What's that again?
Oh, at the recommendation on the previous slide, needs that are reasonable to meet but cannot be funded at this time.
Yeah. And is there any public comment?
One hand, Colin Fisk.
I see Colin's hand up. Yes, sir.
Hello again. Yeah, I think I appreciate all the effort that goes into this unmet transit needs process every year, and I think that presentation, gave you an idea of some of the many unmet needs that we have. I do always feel the need to emphasize that when we talk about unmet transit needs, with a capital UTN, it's a specific legal definition, definition of the statute, and then HCOG's definition, and there are plenty of other transit needs, that don't qualify for this particular list. And I also think, I think I say this every year, but the practice has been to assess potential new service or changes in service in terms of the marginal fare box and the marginal performance of a change. And we really think that it's important to also assess the overall impact of a change on the whole transit system, because transit users, bus riders don't experience, one aspect of the system alone. Like a good example of that is the later night service. You don't get typically as many riders on a later night service, but it might facilitate someone taking the bus earlier who wouldn't have otherwise, because they know they can get home later. So really taking a holistic look at creating a complete service rather than just the marginal impact is important from a planning perspective. Thank you.
And thank you. Any other? Yes, Supervisor Madrone.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for that detailed report. Really appreciate that. And it is always such a conundrum where we know we have these unmet needs, but we just don't have the funding. I think hopefully Measure O will help if we keep our federal funding and other things, which are big question marks. But I want to commend Greg Pratt and the HTA board. Sometimes we look at these unmet needs and we get stuck in this thing as, well, it's just that we can't afford to put another bus on every half hour. But what Greg's doing is looking at, as was mentioned, microtransit, using vans, 10, 12-person vans rather than the big buses for north of Arcata, like McKinleyville to Trinidad and West Haven, as a unique way to try and increase the ridership, which already, the fare box already looks good already, let alone if we implement this microtransit, which will be temporary initially as a pilot, but I think it has great potential in that area. So I really appreciate Greg and the board trying to look outside the box and figure out, okay, doesn't work at this level, but what if we use vans rather than 40-person buses or whatever they are? So I just want to commend them for that effort and look forward to seeing that one implemented. Thank you.
And thank you. Any other? And don't see any hands up on the. And before we go to a motion, again, you had a suggestion for a change in the motion, not a change, but an addition to looking ahead that could be met in the future. Was that it?
Yeah, just to not rule out the possibility that some of these might be met in the future.
Okay. Can we get a motion?
I would so move the motion that was recommended with that addition.
Second.
So we have a motion and a second and a voice vote. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None? Thank you. And now we will, by motion, again, reconvene as the HCOG board and at the same time. Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, I saw transit and just automatically I went to unmet transit needs. So we do have transit needs, Humboldt County Roads 911 Emergency Response Measure O.
Thank you. So as I mentioned at the last board meeting, I had participated in the Measure O funding work group with the county and some other folks. And I also have met with Sean Quincy aside from that. And the county is working up a memorandum of understanding agreement that will come to this board at a future meeting on how the contract will work between the county board of supervisors and the HCOG board. One of the things that Sean has also asked is that HCOG establish who is eligible to receive the funds. And at the same time, keeping in mind what the intent of these transit funds are to be used for, and that is to maintain and also enhance the transit service in the region. The Board of Supervisors has not made a decision yet on the split between those funds, and I believe that that's going to next Tuesday's meeting, and I will be attending that meeting. I did present a recommendation to the HCOG SS TAC and TAC recommending that the Measure O funds be made available to transit agencies that serve the general public, and at the same time following the guidelines that we use for the state transit assistance funds. And my reason for doing that recommendation is given the number of unmet transit needs that we just listened to, and hearing these unmet transit needs year after year, and with the reason that they're not being met is because they can't be funded. The city of Eureka, the city of Arcata, and the county of Humboldt use all of their LTF money on their transit, and that's where a lot of these needs are coming from those entities, and so there isn't any funds available. If the Measure O funds are provided to HTA, which is the only transit agency that follows those STA guidelines and that serves the general public, there could be an impact on the community's transit needs. And so the SS TAC did unanimously support the recommendation. I took it to the TAC as well, and that was not unanimous. We had one abstention. But the TAC also was forwarding their recommendation, but both committees wanted to make sure that it was with the addition that the eligibility of requirements will be reassessed, every year. And so that doesn't mean that if this board chooses to go with that recommendation, that it sticks for the entirety of the Measure O funds and when they're available, but they will reassess that on a yearly basis. And so with that, I'd be happy to turn it back over to you and answer any questions.
Well, thank you. And it's a thoughtful process. And I would ask if there's any questions or comments for Debbie at this time. Is there any public comment? Call it.
Yeah, hi. I shared this comment at the TAC, and so I just wanted to share it with you all as well, which is just to say that although I think, as we've seen, there are plenty of unmet transit needs, and prioritizing funding to meet those in the immediate term makes sense. We do feel that we should maintain maximum flexibility for this local funding going forward, and try not to set any precedent of restricting it in the same way that state transit funds are restricted, because one of the benefits of having a local source of funding is that it doesn't come with strings attached, and it can be used in creative ways that are not subject to any of those restrictions. Thanks.
Thank you. Again, I will ask if the PAC has any questions or comments. Oh, Sean. Yes.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, this is Sean Quincy with the county. And first, I just want to thank the HCOG staff for all of their work on this. It's been a really interesting process and surprisingly complicated process. So, thank you to Debbie and the staff for all of their work. One thing I wasn't able to attend the SS TAC meeting that provided the recommendation that's before you today. One thing I will say on the request to reassess the eligibility every year is that I know the long-term planning and predictability of this funding was an important factor. And one, if the eligibility is reassessed every year and it turns into a grant program, that adds a lot of complexity and frankly administrative cost and time to the process. And if there was a grant process that was done with this funding, it would need to be likely done by HCOG, as that would go through the SS TAC committee. So, whatever recommendation HCOG provides to the board on this, I would just keep that in mind. Some of this streamlining is really important in this process.
Thank you. Again, I don't see any more on the public comment. Is there any here? Well, then we can ask for a motion and a second.
I'll move, Mr. Chair, that the that the PAC recommend to the board to adopt the fiscal year 25-26 unmet transit needs report of findings with the resolution 25-10 determining.
The wrong one there, buddy.
We're on the Measure O tax.
Oh,
Item B.
we didn't do a motion for the previous one?
We did.
It was for item B.
How embarrassing. Sorry.
Well, there was two in a row with the transit needs in the subject line.
If you'd like to.
Yeah, okay, since got started, I'll. I move that the PAC recommend that the HCOG board consider approving Measure O tax funds be made available to transit agencies that meet the same eligibility requirements as the Transportation Development Act State Transit Assistance Funds and provide transit services to the general public with the option to reassess eligibility requirements annually.
Second.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second for a voice vote. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? None. So thank you. All right, now we have no more transit needs, so we will reconvene as the HCOG board at the time approving the PAC recommendations by motion.
I'll move to reconvene and approve the PAC recommendation.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
No, opposed? None? All right. So we have our board action items. And we'll let Debbie present a staff report.
So the next staff report is an update to the Coast Central Credit Union signatories and business credit card. And as HCOG welcomes our new executive director starting on April 28th, we will need to add his name to all of the HCOG accounts and at the same time remove my name. So that will be on our agenda that first week that he starts. And also authorize Brendan to open up a credit card in his name. And so with that, I'll turn it back over to you and answer any questions.
Okay. Do any of the board members have a question regarding this item? It seems like we just did it a little short time ago.
It does. Well, kind of a long time ago.
I'll move that the HCOG board remove Debbie Ager on all Coast Central Credit Union accounts and authorize Executive Director Brendan Bird, effective April 28th, 2025, as the primary signatory on all accounts, and to authorize the opening of a Coast Central Union business credit card for Brendan Bird in the amount of $10,000.
We have a motion and a second for this item. It's a voice vote, so all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None? Again, we have another task ahead of us and another retirement.
Yes, a re-retirement.
All right. So we come to the HCOG and staff and PAC member reports, starting with our executive director's report.
Okay, so HCOG was successful in sending out a request for proposals for the North State Hydrogen Fueling Station, and I'm happy to report that we received 4 proposals. Those have been turned over to a selection committee to review them and score them, and so a consultant selection will be brought back before you next month at your meeting. The other thing is, yesterday I participated in a PG&E customer advisory group meeting, and it was very interesting. Some of you may know Brian Gerving, who used to work for the city of Eureka, I think for 20 plus years. He now works as the division manager for PG&E. And it was interesting to hear and see the different businesses that were there. Some of them were the tribes, and it was interesting to hear that some of the people who live on the reservations, like 65% of them, do not have PG&E, and the importance of getting electricity out to those places, and for safety, emergency response reasons as well. Brian did say that he is willing to come to the HCOG TAC and provide a presentation and information on what the connection would be with PG&E and HCOG and how those work together. And so I will be giving Brendan that information, and it could possibly come to this board at a future date as well. The last thing is, this is my last HCOG board meeting, and so I'd really like to say thank you, and I have felt honored and appreciate the opportunity to have been able to sit in these last several months and help with the process of bringing on a new executive director. And so again, thank you.
Thank you. Any questions or comments for Debbie?
Thank you.
Yes.
I just want to congratulate you on your second retirement from HCOG. And thank you for filling in. It was really important that someone with the knowledge to do so could step in. So good work.
Yes. Thank you for being that steady presence that kept us moving forward. So.
It's been fun. I've enjoyed it. I've enjoyed being back at the office and working with HCOG staff. Kind of feels like I never left. So
Oh. Well, thank you again. And now, I don't know that we have any outside person, but we have Tasha here for Caltrans reports.
I'll try to get through this quick. I just wanted to remind everyone that there'll be an in-person public meeting for the State Route 255 Corridor Management Plan on Thursday, April 24th at 5:30 p.m. at the Manila Community Resource Center. So this will be the opportunity for public to provide further feedback on that corridor plan that Jesse presented on last meeting. Indianola Interchange work on the bridge continues with successful completion of the deck pour this last Tuesday, so that's pretty exciting. Once the load transfer platform is complete, we'll begin to raise the highway grade to the elevation of the bridge. Our team has identified a way to maintain the southbound lanes in their existing location until traffic is realigned to the new alignment of the bridge. Previously, we were planning a small detour, so we're excited about that change, and it will decrease impacts to the traveling public. We still plan to complete bridge work by the end of the summer and likely have the half signal at Airport Road done by the end of this year. We're satisfied with the progress we've made to date and appreciate the community's patience. We have a tribal evacuation preparedness project. District 1 is partnering with District 2 in the Reading area on a plan to improve evacuation preparedness on State Routes 96 and 169, which are crucial for wildfire safety and climate resilience. The proposed project will focus on vegetation management, erosion control, rockfall mitigation, and enhanced traffic systems such as signage and emergency communication devices to better prepare us for extreme weather and wildfires. Pending funding, we are aiming to begin construction in 2030. Before then, we're asking for input. So there's currently a survey available on our website that seeks information about concerns and areas for improvements. So I'd be happy to follow up with a link to that survey if there's interest. It's open through May 1st. The Ferndale Access Project, the project initiation document is moving along. There'll be another public meeting in the coming months to review public survey results and further go over the project details. And there's more information about that on the Caltrans engagement portal. And lastly, I gave each of you a Caltrans contact card. It's just a helpful little tool with some of links to the customer service portal and other good resources. So I have others. If you want more, I could bring more to the next meeting. You can share out. So thanks.
Thank you. And is there any PAC member reports?
Thank you. On behalf of HTA, I got some exciting stuff. It's been a big month for us in the last month. Over the course of several months, there was a whole process to transfer Arcata and Mad River Transit System assets and management and functions to the Humboldt Transit Authority. So appreciate the trust from Arcata's decision makers, and I think we'll really be able to realize some efficiencies there. And also this last month, we moved the dial-a-ride system from a contractor operation where we'd had a long-time contractor relationship that was really appreciated, but we did bring those vehicles in-house as well. So, and we'll be offering to hire the drivers who were working for the private company that was our contractor. So I don't yet know how many of them have come over, but certainly made them those offers. And those will be utilized for not only paratransit, but also microtransit, throughout the community. So really looking forward to having just more, I sort of hate to say control, but in a way, having more control over the system, the drivers, the vehicles, and how they're dispatched. So just having that all in one organization is, I think, is going to lead to some real improvements. And we also did authorize free fares for youth and seniors on all of our systems between June and August, and then free fares for all passengers in July of this year. So we'll be promoting that. And part of this is to collect data about what some of the pros and cons are of having free fares. For our drivers, they don't have to handle money or deal with a lot of the interactions with passengers, at least as far as money. So I think there's some efficiencies that they appreciate there. But we also need to see, kind of what the outcomes are. So we have done this before, but this will be more data driven this time around to really look at what the results are. And lastly, I think we may have mentioned this before, but the hydrogen bus is here and it's bopping around on the road now, the official term. So, and it is also being fueled with hydrogen fuel at our facility here in Eureka. So it is a temporary fueler, but that was one part of our big Transit Intercity Rail Connect project funding, and it's stage one of many when it comes to rollout of hydrogen in Humboldt. But we do have one hydrogen bus, and our staff are learning about it. The drivers and maintenance workers are learning about it, and soon it'll be out there on the roadways, and you won't be able to miss it because it'll say all over it that it's our hydrogen bus. So it's very exciting, something very new for us and new for the region. So we're very proud.
Well, thank you. Exciting stuff. Any other board member reports? Seeing none. I believe we've reached the moment of adjournment. So thank you all for being here.